Part 1, Baghdad and the Birth of the House of Wisdom. Hey guys, tonight we begin with Baghdad, the city that would become the beating brain of the medieval world. The House of Wisdom, Bait al-Hikmah, wasn't just a library. No, it was a statement, a message, a hub where the Abbasid caliphs said, "We inherit the wisdom of all previous civilizations, Greek, Persian, Indian, Syriac, and we're going to show it off." And if we're honest, there was a bit of bragging involved, because why not? If you can fund scholars to translate Aristotle, refined algebra, and map the stars, a little flex is allowed. Imagine Baghdad in the 9th century. Streets alive with merchants shouting over each other, selling spices, textiles, carpets, and probably more coffee than any human should consume. The Tigris flowed gently through the city, carrying boats with goods, letters, and occasionally the odd stray manuscript. Golden domes and shining minarets caught the sun, while the scent of fresh bread and date syrup drifted from the markets. Somewhere in the heart of this bustling metropolis, scholars were hunched over manuscripts, translating, copying, and debating minor details like how to spell Pythagoras in Arabic script. It was, in short, a nerd paradise, chaotic but productive. Daily life of a scholar. Let's peek into a scholar's day. The morning begins early, with the call to prayer echoing through the streets. A young student drags himself from his quarters, rubbing sleep from his eyes, carrying a scroll tied in silk. The library smells faintly of ink, old paper, and oil lamps. A Khwarizmi is at his table, demonstrating algebra problems, chalking numbers, sometimes mumbling about mistakes in the original manuscript. In another corner, a Persian astronomer adjusts an astrolabe, calculating angles and star positions with meticulous care. Greek texts lie open, dust motes drifting through sunbeams that filter through lattice windows. Meals are quick and functional. Flatbread, dates, perhaps cheese. But the work never truly stops. Scholars scribble in margins, add footnotes, debate terminology, and sometimes snap with their head on a desk, hoping no one notices. A patron may enter unexpectedly, a princess commissioning a translation, a caliph inspecting the library, or a visiting scholar delivering a newly acquired manuscript. The scholar barely looks up because the work must continue. The translation movement. The real engine of the House of Wisdom was translation. Greek, Persian, Indian, and Syriac texts flowed into Baghdad, often passing through multiple languages before arriving in Arabic. Greek texts came first, often via Syriac intermediaries. Indian mathematical and astronomical treatises followed, sometimes with diagrams and notes that seemed inscrutable until deciphered by a local scholar. Persian science and medicine added yet another layer, creating a rich, syncretic body of knowledge. Consider a medical manuscript arriving from Persia. It details surgical procedures and treatments. A Greek commentary accompanies it. A translator adds Arabic notes, sometimes correcting a measurement or procedure based on local knowledge. By the time it is recopied, it carries centuries of accumulated wisdom, ready to influence scholars in Europe long before it reaches them physically. Science and mathematics. Al-Khwarizmi, often called the father of algebra, is probably scribbling somewhere in the library, chalking equations, occasionally sighing in frustration at Greek arithmetic that doesn't quite fit Indian numerals. Astronomy thrives, too. Al-Farghani measures celestial bodies, refining Ptolemy's tables, preparing data that will eventually inform European navigation. Geometry, algebra, trigonometry, they are all discussed, argued over, and perfected in the quiet glow of lamps. Medicine thrives. Raziz, al-Razi, and Hunayn ibn Ishaq translate, comment on, and refine the works of Galen and Hippocrates, occasionally adding observations from local hospitals. Ethics, philosophy, logic, metaphysics, they're all debated. Scholars argue over Aristotle, Plotinus, and Plato, sometimes gesturing wildly with pens, occasionally tipping over inkpots in frustration. It is messy, human, and incredibly productive. Baghdad's city life. Baghdad itself is a character in this story. The streets are alive with merchants, children playing, animals wandering, and the Tigris flowing steadily. Festivals bring music, lights, and crowds. Ideas flow alongside goods. A manuscript copied late at night might find its way into a boat, into a bazaar, and eventually to Spain, Sicily, or North Africa. The city is a melting pot. Arabs, Persians, Syriacs, Jews, Christians, and travelers from faraway lands mix in the streets and in scholarly circles. Women, though rarely mentioned in official records, have influence. Patrons from the Abbasid court commission works, fund scholars, and help maintain collections. Even if their names are lost to history, their contributions ripple through the manuscripts, translations, and libraries of Baghdad. Part 2. Scholars, Science, and the Heart of Baghdad. Now that we've wandered through the bustling streets of Baghdad and peeked at the beginnings of the House of Wisdom, let's step further inside. Imagine walking down its long, lamp-lit corridors. Scrolls stacked on shelves, ink pots scattered across wooden tables, and scholars leaning over manuscripts with furrowed brows. Translating, annotating, debating. This is the core of the intellectual heartbeat of the city. Al-Khwarizmi and algebra. Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, often simply called Al-Khwarizmi, was probably the first person you would bump into in the library's mathematical wing. He is scribbling numbers on a parchment, explaining the principles of algebra to students who look simultaneously fascinated and exhausted. Algebra, derived from the Arabic al-jabr, wasn't just a set of rules. It was a way of thinking systematically about numbers and unknowns. Imagine Al-Khwarizmi leaning over a desk, drawing geometric figures, occasionally muttering Greek letters under his breath, translating them into practical Arabic notation. Nearby, a student spills ink on a manuscript and Al-Khwarizmi sighs, not angrily, but with the subtle exasperation of someone accustomed to both human error and genius. He isn't just teaching mathematics, he's creating a framework that will travel to Europe centuries later, influencing mathematicians like Fibonacci, and eventually the development of modern algebra. Hunayn ibn Ishaq and medicine. In the medical wing, Hunayn ibn Ishaq, the Christian scholar often described as the greatest translator of his age, is carefully copying a Greek medical manuscript into Arabic. His workshop smells of parchment, ink, and sometimes herbs used in medicinal experiments. Hunayn isn't just copying. He's annotating, clarifying ambiguities, and occasionally arguing with the text. If Galen wrote something unclear, Hunayn might add a note. Perhaps he meant this, though it seems unlikely. Nearby, Rhazes, known in Latin as Al-Razi, is conducting his own research. Hospitals in Baghdad serve as live classrooms. Rhazes observes patients, tests treatments, and adds his findings to existing texts. Here, medicine isn't static, it's dynamic, constantly refined, debated, and cross-referenced with Greek, Indian, and Persian sources. Al-Farabi and philosophy. Meanwhile, in the philosophy wing, Al-Farabi is hosting a small circle of students. They are debating Aristotle's logic, sometimes in Arabic, sometimes in Greek transliterations. Al-Farabi is known for synthesizing Plato, Aristotle, and Islamic thought, attempting to create a cohesive philosophical system. Discussions might float from ethics to metaphysics, from human behavior to governance. Occasionally, a student asks a question that leaves even Al-Farabi pausing, because some questions don't have neat answers. It's easy to imagine these debates stretching late into the evening, the scholars' lamps flickering as shadows dance across manuscripts. They argue, gesticulate, sip tea, make notes, and occasionally fall asleep at their desks, only to be awakened by the scent of ink or the distant call to prayer. Daily life in the library. A typical day in the House of Wisdom is a mixture of precision, chaos, and occasional charm. Students arrive before dawn, scrolls are sorted, cataloged, and copied. Scholars debate in low voices or gesturing widely, occasionally tossing a scrap of paper to illustrate a point. Meals are modest, dates, flatbread, lentils, perhaps a bit of cheese. But the real nourishment is knowledge. Some scholars take short naps, balancing the fatigue of long hours with the intensity of intellectual labor. Visitors occasionally enter. A princess or caliph might inspect ongoing translations. A foreign scholar could arrive with a new manuscript carefully wrapped in silk. Even a stray merchant might bring a manuscript he acquired from elsewhere. Every scroll is a potential treasure. Every annotation a subtle innovation. Manuscript culture. The manuscripts themselves are remarkable. Greek works like Elements of Euclid or Ptolemy's Almagest arrive via Syriac intermediaries. Indian texts provide advanced mathematics, astronomical tables, and the decimal system, introducing numerals that would later become familiar as Arabic numerals. Persian treatises contribute to medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. Each text passes through careful scrutiny. Translators check accuracy, annotate ambiguities, and sometimes disagree amongst themselves. A manuscript of Hippocrates might be compared with Indian surgical techniques, then revised with notes from a Persian physician. The result is not mere a copy, it's a synthesis, a living document enriched by centuries of accumulated knowledge. Baghdad, streets, markets, and cultural life. The city outside the library is just as alive as the intellectual life inside. Merchants call out their wares, children run along alleyways, boats drift along the Tigris carrying goods and gossip alike. Festivals bring music, dancing, and the smell of sweet treats. Scholars occasionally step outside, stretching legs, buying a date or some bread, exchanging ideas with passersby, or simply observing the rhythms of city life. Cultural diversity is everywhere. Arabs, Persians, Syriacs, Jews, and travelers from distant lands mix freely. Even subtle contributions from Numan patrons, commissioning works, funding translations, or supporting scholars, shape the intellectual ecosystem, quietly but profoundly. Evening reflection. As dusk settles over Baghdad, the lamps inside the House of Wisdom glow softly. Scholars continue their debates, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in animated discussion. Ink pots are refilled, scrolls are carefully rolled, and marginal notes are added. The city quiets down, but the work of translation, commentary, and intellectual pursuit continues, a testament to human curiosity and persistence. The House of Wisdom isn't just a building, it's a living organism. It absorbs ideas from every corner of the known world, nurtures them, and prepares them for journeys far beyond Baghdad. It is the heart of knowledge, the soul of a civilization that refused to let wisdom die, no matter how challenging the circumstances.
Part 3. Astronomy, Medicine, and the Abbasid Vision. By the time you enter the deeper corridors of the House of Wisdom, the hum of intellectual activity is nearly tangible. Lamps flicker over tables covered in manuscripts. Scrolls of various sizes, some small enough to hold in one hand, others sprawling across the table, line the shelves. Scholars mutter to themselves, debate in low voices, and occasionally pause to glance at diagrams of stars, human anatomy, or geometric figures. Astronomy and the stars. Astronomy is more than an academic pursuit in Baghdad. It is a practical necessity. Calendars, prayer times, navigation, and astrology all depend on careful observation. Scholars like Al-Farhani meticulously measure the stars and planets, refining Ptolemy's astronomical tables. Instruments such as astrolabes, armillary spheres, and quadrants are standard tools. Imagine Al-Farhani leaning over an astrolabe measuring the angle of a star just above the horizon. His assistants record the data in meticulous tables, cross-referencing Greek sources with Indian astronomical texts. The decimal system carried from India allows precise calculations, while Persian commentaries add nuance and corrections. Night after night, they observe, calculate, debate, and occasionally sigh in frustration when clouds obscure their view. These observations are not kept secret. Manuscripts are copied, annotated, and circulated, spreading knowledge to faraway lands. Eventually, some of these tables influenced navigation in Europe centuries later, guiding ships that cross oceans unknown to Baghdad scholars. Medicine and hospitals. Medicine flourishes in parallel. Baghdad boasts hospitals or bimaristans that function as both treatment centers and classrooms. Physicians like Razes or Al-Razi study patients closely, comparing symptoms in treatments, often documenting their observations meticulously. Hunayn ibn Ishaq translates Greek and Syriac medical texts into Arabic, sometimes adding notes based on local practices. The combination of observation, translation, and experimentation leads to significant advancements. Physicians are aware of hygiene, use antiseptic methods in basic surgery, and prescribe herbal remedies alongside Greek and Indian techniques. Manuscripts record all this knowledge, often annotated with notes on rare diseases, seasonal epidemics, and innovative treatments. Patients in these hospitals range from ordinary citizens to nobles. The scholars treat them systematically, teaching students at the same time. A day in the hospital might involve observing a patient with a fever, consulting ancient texts for treatment methods, debating a fellow physician over the correct dosage, and finally, writing a note for future scholars. It is in essence a living encyclopedia of human health. Indian and Persian contributions. The House of Wisdom's greatness owes much to cross-cultural input. Indian mathematicians introduced numerals 0 to 9, the decimal system, and advanced techniques in arithmetic and algebra. Persian scholars contribute detailed observations of stars, medical knowledge, and philosophical commentaries. These contributions are not treated as foreign curiosities, they are carefully integrated into the intellectual framework of Baghdad. Scholars compare Greek logic with Indian mathematics, Persian medicine with Galen, and eventually produce synthesized texts that carry forward this hybrid knowledge. The multicultural nature of scholarship is one of the library's defining features. The Abbasid vision. The Abbasid caliphs, particularly Al-Mamun, understand that knowledge is power. Funding scholars, commissioning translations, building observatories, and establishing hospitals is not just altruism, it is a statement. Baghdad becomes a cultural and intellectual capital, a city where ideas thrive alongside commerce and politics. Patrons ensure that the House of Wisdom has resources, ink, parchment, paper, eventually imported from China, instruments for astronomy, and rooms large enough to host scholars from diverse backgrounds. Occasionally, caliphs walk through inspecting the work, discussing observations, or posing questions. Some of these rulers are curious, some impatient, and some simply performative, but all recognize the prestige that knowledge brings. Daily life and cultural integration. Imagine a day where the call to prayer echoes over the Tigris. Scholars arrive early, carrying manuscripts or instruments. Students follow senior scholars, taking notes or copying texts. Streets outside are busy, merchants shouting prices, children playing, animals wandering, and boats carrying goods along the river. Festivals punctuate city life with music, food, and light-hearted chaos. Even in this vibrant setting, subtle contributions from women, either as patrons or facilitators, ensure the library thrives. A noblewoman might fund a translation project or commission a physician to record innovative treatments. These acts, though rarely acknowledged, influence generations of scholars. Evening reflection. As dusk falls, the House of Wisdom is alive with quiet activity. Lamps flicker over manuscripts, debates continue in hushed tones, and scholars annotate texts for future generations. Each scroll is a testament to centuries of accumulated knowledge. Some will survive the trials of history, eventually influencing Europe during the Renaissance. Others will be lost, a reminder of knowledge's fragility. The House of Wisdom is more than a library. It is a living organism, absorbing ideas from every corner of the known world, refining them and preparing them for the future. Astronomy, medicine, mathematics, philosophy, these disciplines intertwine, forming a web of human curiosity and ingenuity that transcends borders, languages, and cultures.
Part 4. Translations, Manuscripts, and the Journey of Knowledge. By now, we are well inside the House of Wisdom. Imagine rows upon rows of scrolls, each one a repository of human thought accumulated over centuries. Greek, Indian, Persian texts converge here, awaiting careful translation, annotation, and sometimes spirited debate. This is a place where knowledge is alive, dynamic, and occasionally frustrating. The translation chains. Consider a manuscript of Ptolemy's Alchemist. It might have started in Greek Alexandria, traveled via Syriac scholars in Syria, and finally arrived in Baghdad. Hunayn ibn Ishaq and his circle carefully translate it into Arabic, often comparing different copies, noting inconsistencies, and sometimes adding commentary. Margins fill with observations, corrections, and philosophical musings. Indian mathematical texts bring zero, decimal notation, and complex arithmetic methods. Persian treatises add refinement in astronomy and medicine. Each manuscript becomes a collaborative effort spanning centuries and civilizations. Translation isn't a mechanical task. It's interpretive, creative, and occasionally argumentative. Scholars might spend months on a single text, arguing over a subtle grammatical nuance that changes the meaning of an equation or medical instruction. Scholarly debates and marginalia. Inside the library, debates ripple through the rooms. Al-Farabi may argue with a student about Aristotle's logic. Al-Khwarizmi could be revising a calculation while simultaneously explaining it to an assistant. Hunayn ibn Ishaq and colleagues might spend days discussing a single medical term in Galen's text. Margins of manuscripts are alive with commentary, tiny scribbles, diagrams, clarifications, and sometimes even subtle jokes or sarcastic notes. These annotations are crucial. They allow future scholars to understand not just the text, but the process of thinking behind it. A physician reading centuries later can see how an ancient method was interpreted, corrected, or questioned. This creates a living chain of knowledge where each generation builds upon the previous one. Knowledge travels west. Even in the 9th and 10th centuries, manuscripts don't stay in Baghdad. Scholars, traders, and diplomats carry them to Spain, Sicily, and North Africa. Cities like Toledo become hubs of translations centuries later, where Arabic texts are rendered into Latin for European scholars. Al-Khwarizmi's algebra, Avicenna's medicine, and Aristotle's philosophy eventually influenced the European Renaissance. Imagine a Latin scholar in Toledo unrolling a scroll originally copied in Baghdad, studying annotations made by Hunayn ibn Ishaq, and marveling at the mathematical methods from India. The House of Wisdom's influence has escaped centuries and borders, demonstrating that knowledge is remarkably resilient. Intellectual methodology. What sets the House of Wisdom apart is not just accumulation, but methodology. Scholars do not blindly copy texts. They compare sources, test calculations, debate interpretations, and refine methods. A mathematical text is not just copied, it is verified. A medical treatise is not just translated, it is cross-checked with observations from Baghdad's hospitals. Philosophy is not just read, it is interrogated. This meticulous approach ensures that knowledge is not only preserved, but enhanced. Even lost manuscripts leave echoes in surviving works, influencing astronomy tables, medical procedures, philosophical discourse, and eventually the structure of European universities. Daily life in the scriptorium. Life continues rhythmically. Morning brings scholars with fresh scrolls, midday brings debates and meals of bread, dates, and cheese. Evening brings careful annotation, and night sometimes brings quiet reflection under the lamp. Some scholars nap at their desks, waking to continue their work. Occasionally, a patron or foreign scholar arrives, adding new manuscripts or requesting translations. It is intense, slow, meticulous work, but for those involved, it is deeply rewarding. Knowledge is the currency here, and every scroll is a potential breakthrough, every annotation a bridge to future generations. The House of Wisdom's legacy. Even in its prime, the House of Wisdom is aware that destruction is possible. Manuscripts are copied, duplicated, and sometimes sent abroad to ensure survival. The Mongol invasion is centuries away, but scholars are cautious. Knowledge is fragile, but it is also persistent. By the 12th and 13th centuries, texts from Baghdad influence Europe indirectly. Fibonacci learns the Indo-Arabic numeral system. Physicians in Paris consult Avicenna's canon of medicine. Philosophers integrate Aristotle via Arabic commentaries. Baghdad's intellectual heartbeat has already reached the Western world long before anyone imagined a renaissance.
Part 5. The Mongol Invasion and the Fragile Legacy of Baghdad. By the mid-13th century, Baghdad had enjoyed centuries as a shining intellectual capital. Scholars worked diligently, manuscripts accumulated, and the House of Wisdom stood as a beacon of knowledge. But history has a way of reminding us that even the grandest achievements are fragile. The Mongol threat. Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis, advanced toward Baghdad with an army that Europe would later mythologize for its ruthlessness. The city's defenses were formidable in theory, but in practice, the Mongols' strategy was overwhelming. Scholars and citizens alike sensed impending disaster. The streets, once filled with the chatter of merchants and the laughter of children, took on a quiet tension. Inside the House of Wisdom, manuscripts were still being copied, ink-stained fingers tracing equations and medical instructions. Debates still murmured over the finer points of Aristotle. Scholars were aware that their work might be imperiled, yet daily routines persisted. Knowledge, after all, does not pause even in the face of impending catastrophe. Scholars and manuscripts. Some manuscripts were hastily duplicated, others packed into chests for evacuation. Scholars debated which texts were essential. Greek mathematical treatises? Absolutely. Indian astronomical tables? Definitely. Persian medical commentaries? Of course. Philosophy? Debatable, but perhaps too valuable to leave behind. Even in these tense hours, human nature remains consistent. Arguments over marginalia continued. Who wrote the better translation of Ptolemy? Was this equation correct? Even under threat, the scholarly spirit endured. Scribes and translators working meticulously, almost ritualistically, preserving knowledge for an uncertain future. The fall of Baghdad. In 1258, Hulagu's forces breached the city. Chroniclers report dramatic scenes. Libraries looted, buildings burned, citizens fleeing. The Tigris, carrying debris, manuscripts, and the remnants of ink from destroyed scrolls, became a symbol of both literal and metaphorical loss. Scholars were killed, captured, or scattered, yet some survived, taking precious texts with them. It is tempting to romanticize the destruction, rivers of ink flowing into the Tigris. Likely exaggerated, yes, but the truth remains tragic. The House of Wisdom as a physical institution was gone, but knowledge had already escaped, dispersed across the Islamic world, North Africa, and eventually Europe. Survival and diaspora. Surviving scholars carried manuscripts to cities like Cairo, Damascus, and Aleppo. Some texts reached Spain, Sicily, and Morocco. Even the simplest duplication efforts ensured that centuries of accumulated knowledge were not entirely lost. Algebra, astronomy tables, medical treatises, and philosophical works survived, influencing distant civilizations. This diaspora of knowledge demonstrates a remarkable truth. While buildings, cities, and empires fall, ideas endure. The legacy of Baghdad's scholars did not perish with the House of Wisdom. Their methods, debates, and annotations continued to shape intellectual history long after the city itself had changed. Reflection on fragility and resilience. The story of the House of Wisdom reminds us of the fragile nature of human achievement. Empires can fall, libraries can burn, scholars can flee, but knowledge, if nurtured and transmitted, has a resilience that surpasses political and military upheaval. Baghdad's streets, once filled with the sounds of commerce and scholarship, fell silent, yet in distant lands, copied manuscripts continued to circulate. European universities, centuries later, would unknowingly build upon Arabic translations of Greek, Persian, and Indian texts, a quiet testament to the House of Wisdom's enduring impact. Legacy in Europe and beyond. By the 13th and 14th centuries,
European scholars were encountering algebra, astronomy, and medicine rooted in Baghdad's intellectual culture. Fibonacci learned Hindu-Arabic numerals. Physicians studied Avicenna's canon of medicine. Philosophers debated Aristotle through Arabic commentaries. The ideas seeded in Baghdad centuries earlier had become part of a global intellectual heritage. Even as Baghdad's golden age ended, the ripple effects of the House of Wisdom continued. Its story is both cautionary and inspiring. Monumental achievements can vanish physically, yet their essence survives, travels, and flourishes in ways the original creators could hardly imagine. As night falls over the ruins of old Baghdad, it's easy to imagine the House of Wisdom as a distant, almost mythical place. Lamps long extinguished, scrolls lost or scattered, yet its influence whispers on. This is where our story slows, gently, not with dramatic action, but reflective meditation, the kind that seeps softly into sleep. The myth of the House of Wisdom. Chroniclers later romanticized Baghdad's libraries. One massive, perfectly organized mega library, tragically destroyed in a single dramatic event. Reality was messier. Knowledge existed across multiple centers, in private collections and scholars' homes. Yet the myth persists, a symbol of human curiosity, intellectual ambition, and the fragility of learning. Stories of rivers running black with ink or Mongols gleefully destroying scrolls capture imagination. Whether literal or exaggerated, these tales highlight what was at stake: centuries of accumulated wisdom, cultural synthesis, and relentless curiosity. Baghdad's intellectual legacy. Even after destruction, Baghdad's intellectual spirit endured. Surviving manuscripts traveled across the Islamic world and into Europe. Algebra and arithmetic informed Fibonacci. Avicenna's canon of medicine shaped European medicine. Philosophical debates translated from Arabic introduced Aristotle to the West. The House of Wisdom may have been physically destroyed, but its essence survived. Knowledge, carefully preserved and transmitted, escaped Tigris, fire, and chaos. Reflection on knowledge and fragility. The House of Wisdom reminds us that knowledge is both fragile and persistent. Empires crumble, libraries burn, cities fall, but ideas, once captured, can transcend time and geography. Scholars' meticulous copying, translating, and annotating ensured that even calamities could not erase centuries of human thought. Every scroll, marginal note, and observation recorded under candlelight mattered. Baghdad scholars leave a quiet call: nurture knowledge, preserve ideas, and pass them on. A living organism. The House of Wisdom was more than a library. It was a living organism. Scholars debated, refined ideas, and collaborated. Science, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy intertwined in ways that would influence the world for centuries. Even today, echoes of its work resonate. Universities, hospitals, and observatories continue to build on foundations laid in Baghdad. Intellectual curiosity, once concentrated in lamp-lit halls, now lives globally, connecting human thought across centuries. Nighttime reflection. Imagine the House of Wisdom in the evening. Scholars hunched over manuscripts, flickering lamps, the soft scratching of pens, debates about Aristotle, Galen, and celestial calculations. Knowledge persisted, quietly, stubbornly, across generations. Even with destruction looming, ideas survived. The House of Wisdom teaches patience, perseverance, and the enduring power of human curiosity. Learning is a gift that transcends time, borders, and calamity. Closing thoughts. Good night, Baghdad. Good night, House of Wisdom. Good night to the scholars, patrons, and curious minds who labored tirelessly, ensuring knowledge would not be confined to a single place or era. As you drift to sleep, imagine the ripple of ideas spreading across centuries, from lamp-lit rooms in Baghdad to universities, observatories, and hospitals worldwide. The House of Wisdom may be gone, but its echo continues, gentle, persistent, and endlessly inspiring. Part 7. Rediscovery, Influence, and the Enduring Spirit of Baghdad. After the catastrophic Mongol invasion of 1258, Baghdad's streets lay in ruin. The Tigris carried debris and remnants of once vast collections of knowledge. Yet, as we drift gently through time, the story of Baghdad's House of Wisdom does not end in smoke and rubble. Instead, it continues quietly, persistently, in the minds and hands of scholars who carried its legacy far beyond the city's walls. Manuscripts in exile. Some of Baghdad's surviving scholars fled to Cairo, Damascus, Aleppo, and other intellectual centers across the Islamic world. They brought with them scrolls, notebooks, and fragments of manuscripts, some in Arabic, some in Persian, Greek, or Syriac translations. Imagine a small room in Cairo, candlelight flickering over scrolls stacked on benches, scholars hunched over tables, carefully copying and annotating texts. They painstakingly preserved medical treatises, astronomical tables, mathematical diagrams, and philosophical works. In this quiet, survival became scholarship itself. Influence across the Islamic world. As manuscripts spread, the intellectual traditions of Baghdad were absorbed and adapted. Cairo's libraries flourished, and scholars in Damascus continued translating, commenting, and teaching. Algebra, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy traveled alongside merchants, diplomats, and students. The spirit of the House of Wisdom, curiosity, precision, and cultural synthesis remained intact. Even without the original building, the ideas and methods continued to influence education, medicine, and science across the Islamic world. Journey to Europe. By the 12th and 13th centuries, European scholars, especially in Spain and Sicily, began encountering Arabic texts. Translations into Latin revealed algebraic methods, Hindu-Arabic numerals, and philosophical commentaries previously unknown in the West. Imagine a scholar in Toledo carefully unrolling a scroll copied from Baghdad centuries earlier. Equations, diagrams, and marginal notes illuminate the room with candlelight. Through these translations, Fibonacci learns of the Hindu-Arabic numeral system, paving the way for modern mathematics. Physicians consult Avicenna's canon of medicine, while philosophers engage with Aristotle filtered through Arabic interpretations. Baghdad's intellectual echo. Even as the city itself rebuilt slowly over the centuries, the House of Wisdom's influence persisted far and wide. Its ripple effects are visible in European universities, mathematics, medicine, philosophy curricula, hospitals adopting systematic patient observation techniques, astronomical tables influencing navigation and exploration. The physical House of Wisdom may have vanished, but its intellectual ethos, careful observation, cross-cultural synthesis, and relentless curiosity survived. Reflection on knowledge and legacy. Baghdad teaches us that knowledge is resilient. Buildings may burn, empires may fall, and libraries may be looted. But once ideas are captured, written, and shared, they transcend borders and generations. Consider the quiet determination of Baghdad scholars, copying manuscripts by candlelight, debating logic, verifying medical formulas, charting stars. They preserved knowledge for the future, unaware of the precise global impact it would eventually have. Modern symbolism. Today, the House of Wisdom exists as a symbol rather than a physical library. It represents human curiosity across cultures and time, the enduring power of learning, and the importance of preserving knowledge despite calamity. From a modern perspective, students studying mathematics, medicine, or philosophy anywhere in the world are, in a way, continuing Baghdad's quiet, persistent legacy. The lamps of scholarship lit in ninth century Baghdad still glow in libraries, lecture halls, and observatories worldwide. Gentle closing. As we close this chapter in our journey, imagine walking through the quiet, lamp-lit halls of the House of Wisdom once more. Scrolls, ink-stained fingers, quiet debates, and the soft hum of intellectual curiosity persist across time. The House of Wisdom was more than a library. It was an idea, a movement, a testament to human curiosity and resilience. And though centuries have passed, its heartbeat continues to echo softly and persistently in every student, scholar, and seeker of knowledge. Part 8. Baghdad's Intellectual Legacy in the Renaissance and Beyond. As centuries pass, the physical streets of Baghdad recover slowly, but the intellectual currents that once flowed from its House of Wisdom now ripple across continents. Europe, emerging from the so-called Dark Ages, begins to encounter these ideas, almost as if Baghdad were quietly whispering across time. Knowledge arrives in Europe. By the 12th and 13th centuries, scholars in Spain, Sicily, and southern France are unrolling Arabic scrolls copied from Baghdad. These manuscripts contain algebra, trigonometry, astronomical tables, and medical treatises. In mathematics, Al-Khwarizmi's algebra inspires Fibonacci, introducing the Hindu-Arabic numeral system. Calculations that once lit up lamplit halls in Baghdad now illuminate European classrooms. In medicine, Avicenna's Canon of Medicine and Reyes's medical treatises guide European physicians in diagnosis, pharmacology, and treatment, bridging centuries of knowledge. In astronomy, Ptolemaic tables refined in Baghdad assist navigators and mapmakers, eventually aiding exploration and the age of discovery. Imagine a 14th century Italian scholar at a candlelit desk tracing Arabic numerals and formulas that originated centuries earlier in Baghdad. The quiet glow of knowledge continues its journey. The humanist Renaissance connection. The spirit of inquiry nurtured in Baghdad also influences the humanist Renaissance. Classical texts, preserved and translated through Arabic intermediaries, reconnect Europe with Aristotle, Galen, and Plato. Scholars debate logic, ethics, and natural philosophy, echoing Baghdad's House of Wisdom's debates centuries prior. The House of Wisdom's approach, cross-cultural synthesis, verification, and meticulous annotation, lays the conceptual groundwork for Renaissance humanism. While the names and cities differ, the intellectual ethos persists. Enduring scientific impact. Baghdad's contributions also underpin the scientific revolution. Observational astronomy, as practiced by Al-Farani and others, inform later European astronomers. Algebraic methods and systematic calculation influence engineers, mathematicians, and natural philosophers. Hospitals and empirical medical practices introduced in Baghdad serve as early models for European medical institutions. The calm, meticulous approach of Baghdad scholars continue to echo in laboratories, libraries, and observatories far from the Tigris. Baghdad as a symbol. Though centuries removed, the House of Wisdom remains a powerful symbol. Persistence of knowledge. Ideas survive empires, invasions, and centuries of change. Cross-cultural synthesis. Greek, Persian, and Indian contributions integrate seamlessly into a global intellectual tradition. Curiosity as a human constant. Scholars in Baghdad mirror students, physicians, and scientists today, sharing a common thread of curiosity and diligence. In this way, Baghdad is never truly gone. Its streets may have changed, but its intellectual heartbeat lives on in classrooms, observatories, and hospitals across the world. Reflection for the listener. As you imagine the quiet lamplit halls, now empty or long gone, think of the knowledge that persists. Algebra equations, astronomical tables, medical treatises. They are whispers from the past, gently guiding the present. The House of Wisdom reminds us that intellectual curiosity is timeless. The pursuit of knowledge, careful observation, and collaborative scholarship, these are threads connecting humanity across centuries. So as we drift further into reflection, picture Baghdad once more. Scholars, scrolls, candlelight, and the quiet hum of inquiry. From the Tigris to Toledo, Cairo, Paris, and beyond, Baghdad's intellectual legacy continues its journey. It is a reminder that human curiosity, once nurtured, can survive disaster, distance, and time. The lamps of the House of Wisdom may have faded, but their light still reaches us, soft and enduring, centuries later. Part 9. Baghdad's Modern Echo and Symbolic Legacy. Centuries have passed since the lamps of the House of Wisdom first flickered over ink-stained scrolls. Baghdad itself has changed countless times, yet the spirit of inquiry nurtured there continues to ripple through history, reaching modern libraries, universities, and even digital archives. The modern symbolism of knowledge. Today, the House of Wisdom is more than a historical building. It is an idea. Its legacy reminds us, curiosity transcends time. Just as Baghdad's scholars pursued knowledge across cultures and languages, modern students and scientists continue this pursuit globally. Preservation matters. Manuscripts and digital copies alike safeguard ideas for future generations. Collaboration and diversity. Baghdad integrated Greek, Persian, and Indian thought. Today, interdisciplinary and international scholarship echoes this approach. Imagine walking into a modern library or university where students study algebra, medicine, or philosophy. Every lecture, every discussion, every annotated textbook carries a whisper of Baghdad's meticulous lamp-lit scholarship. Revival efforts in Baghdad. In recent decades, cultural initiatives and museums in Baghdad have sought to commemorate the House of Wisdom. Digital reconstructions, exhibitions, and scholarly programs attempt to revive the spirit of Baghdad's golden age. These modern efforts are gentle, quiet, and symbolic, reflecting the ethos of scholarship rather than the grandeur of physical buildings. The goal is to inspire curiosity, research, and intellectual exploration. The global ripple. The influence of Baghdad's House of Wisdom extends far beyond Iraq. Consider mathematics classrooms worldwide using algebra, algorithms, and numerals first popularized there, medical schools tracing certain methods to Arabic translations of Greek and Persian texts, astronomy programs that still rely on early observational methods refined by Baghdad scholars. The House of Wisdom, though centuries gone, continues to shape how we study, think, and explore. Reflection on knowledge across time. Imagine for a moment the invisible threads connecting Baghdad's 9th century scholars to a student in a modern university. The same questions of observation, calculation, analysis, and understanding persist. The House of Wisdom was more than a library. It was a mindset, a commitment to intellectual curiosity, and a symbol of human potential. Its legacy demonstrates that ideas, once nurtured, can survive any disaster, any empire, any century. Gentle closing. As you settle into reflection, picture the quiet streets of ancient Baghdad, the lamp-lit halls of scholars, the meticulous copying of scrolls. Then, imagine this spirit flowing outward across centuries through manuscripts, translations, and human thought. The House of Wisdom is gone in form, but alive in essence, still lighting the path of knowledge softly and persistently into our present and future.